Take a deep breath. Perhaps you're here today looking for an answer to a question that keeps running through your mind. Why does God allow me to suffer? Maybe pain has invaded your life through loss, betrayal, or a dream that didn't come true. C.S. Lewis, in his wisdom, said, "God whispers in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is in suffering that we are often awakened to what truly matters." Yet at the same time, it's hard to see God when we're in the middle of the desert. Today, I want to invite you to reflect with me on how God uses even the most difficult moments to shape us, teach us, and love us. Stay with me until the end of this video and discover how you can find purpose, transformation, and hope, even in the most challenging circumstances. When we face pain, the most common question is, if God loves me, why does He allow me to suffer? It's a difficult question, but essential for us to understand the divine purpose behind our struggles. C.S. Lewis reminds us that suffering does not come from God, but is a consequence of free will. He says, God gave us freedom, but that freedom includes the possibility of making mistakes. Since the fall of man, sin has brought suffering into the world, but this does not mean God is indifferent to our pain. On the contrary, He works in all things for a greater good. God gave us the freedom to choose, but with that came the possibility of sin, and sin brought pain. Even so, He has not left us alone in this imperfect world. Isaiah 41:10 assures us, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God." God does not abandon us in suffering. He is present, sustaining us and working in our lives, even when we don't see it. Think about this. What have you learned about yourself or about God in your moments of greatest pain? Often, it is in those moments that we are transformed and drawn into a deeper relationship with Him. Romans 8:28 assures us, "We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him." Even suffering has a purpose, though we may not understand it now. Now that we understand that God doesn't cause suffering but uses it for a greater purpose, let's explore how He transforms pain into a tool to shape our lives. Imagine a sculptor. Before a block of raw stone, to create a masterpiece, he must cut, sand, and shape it. The process is harsh and may seem destructive, but the final result is something beautiful and meaningful. The same is true of God's work in our lives. Yes. Lewis powerfully describes this. God transforms us into something much greater than we imagined ourselves to be. But the process of being shaped is not always comfortable. How many times does pain make us stop and reflect on our lives? It forces us to look to God when we would otherwise be distracted. Lewis said pain is like God's megaphone, a cry of love calling us back to Him. Think of Job, who lost everything but in the end declared, "My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you." Job 42:5. Pain led him to know God more deeply. God uses suffering to shape us. Romans 5:3-4 teaches us, "We also glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope." Every difficulty is an opportunity for spiritual growth. Suffering can teach us to trust more, to be more compassionate, and to become more like Christ. Understanding that pain shapes us is the first step, but how can we find purpose in the midst of it? In the next chapter, we'll reflect on how to find meaning even in the hardest moments. When we're in the middle of pain, everything seems confusing and meaningless. It's like trying to put together a puzzle without seeing the full picture. But C.S. Lewis reminds us, often we'll only understand the purpose of suffering when we look back and see how God was present all along. In pain, we often ask, "Why is this happening to me?" But the truth is, we won't always understand the why immediately. In Jeremiah 29:11, God tells us, "I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you." Just like Joseph, who spent years in prison before becoming the ruler of Egypt, sometimes we only see the purpose after God's work is complete. Suffering isn't just something that happens to us. It's something God uses to work within us. He can use our experiences to make us stronger, more compassionate, and more confident in His grace. As written in 2 Corinthians 12:9, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Even when the purpose of pain isn't clear, it calls us to seek God. In this relationship we find comfort, strength, and meaning. God reminds us, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you." Isaiah 43:2. He never leaves us alone in our struggles. Knowing there is purpose in suffering helps us move forward. But how does this promise of redemption and restoration connect to the eternal future God has prepared for us? Let's reflect on this in the next chapter. Pain may feel endless, but God's promise reminds us that suffering is temporary. There is a glorious end awaiting us, and in it, we find the strength to keep going. C.S. Lewis described this eternal hope brilliantly. "In heaven, the pains of earth will be like shadows, dispelled by the light of God's glory." In Revelation 21:4, we read one of the most comforting promises in the Bible. "He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." This means that every tear, every wound, and every struggle will be restored. God doesn't just heal, He redeems. What seems irreparable now will be transformed into something beautiful and eternal. The marks we carry today won't be erased, but they will be redeemed. Just like the cross, which was a symbol of pain and death, became the greatest symbol of love and redemption, God will use even our darkest moments to reflect His glory. Romans 8:18 reminds us, "I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us." This is the hope that sustains our faith. C.S. Lewis writes, "If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. In heaven we will find the answer to our deepest longings. There, all suffering will give way to incomparable joy. When we look to eternity, we find hope to continue. But how can we live this hope in the here and now? Let's conclude by talking about how to maintain faith and purpose while facing life's challenges. If there's one truth that transcends pain and suffering, it's this: God loves you deeply. He knows every tear, every doubt, and every burden you carry. But He also knows the complete plan for your life, and that plan doesn't end in pain. It ends in victory and redemption. C.S. Lewis teaches us, God is always shaping us for something much greater than we can imagine, and even our pain is part of that work. You may not understand the why of suffering, but you can trust the who. He promised, "Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you." Hebrews 13:5. It's in God's presence that we find the strength to keep moving forward. Now the invitation is before you. Trust God, even without all the answers. As Jesus said in Matthew 11:28, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." He wants to carry your burdens and transform your pain into purpose. Remember, suffering is not the end of your story. God is writing something greater, something eternal. And when everything feels too heavy, look to the cross and the promise of heaven. The pain is temporary, but the glory is eternal. If this message touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs hope today. And before you leave a like so this message can reach even more people. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, click the subscribe button and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any messages like this one. Leave a comment about how God has been working in your life or what spoke to you most in this video. And remember, God sees you, God loves you, and He is with you always.